Good afternoon, everybody. This is Mike Lewis, Vice President of Marketing and Sales here at Awareness Inc. I'd like to welcome everybody on the line right now to our webinar today. I'm really excited about it. Been looking forward to this one for a while. It's a session we have with Brian Solis called Socializing Your Corporate Brand. Brian Solis this afternoon. And for those of you that don't know Brian, he's the principal and founder of FutureWorks, which is a PR and new media agency located out in Silicon Valley. You've probably heard of him. He's been recognized for his views and insights on the convergence of PR, traditional media, and social media, and considered one of the original thought leaders who helped pave the way for social media and PR 2.0, a phrase I believe he coined a little while back. His blog, if you haven't read it, is PR 2.0, which is among the top 1.5% of all blogs tracked by Technorati, and is ranked as one of the leading voices in the Ad Age Power 150 Index of worldwide marketing bloggers. He also just recently published a book which is co-authored with someone we had on the line just a few weeks back, Deirdre Breckenridge, and published by the Financial Times Press, which is called Putting the Public Back in Public Relations, and it's available in bookstores everywhere. If you haven't had a chance to read it yet, I picked it up when I was out at South by Southwest this year. Meant to pick it up beforehand, Brian, sorry. But I read it on my way home in that week, and it's just a great book for anybody interested in getting in the space and learning more about social media. This is a great book for you. And with that, Brian, I'm going to turn the ball over to you and let you get started.
Thanks, Mike. I guess I don't have to do any pitching or selling. That was a good job.
I do my best. That's part of what I do here, you know.
All right. Well, I really want to say thank you, Mike, for having me on, and I also want to thank everybody who's on the line right now. I really appreciate you guys taking time out of your busy days to just kind of get together and maybe learn together. So with that, I did put together PowerPoint slides because I know that's how everybody likes to learn, and I know that our time is limited. So I'm going to fly through the things that I feel are most important, and then Mike, I know you want to have a dialogue here towards the end, so I'll kind of rush through it without rushing through it too much. But basically, the social web and social media in general is creating what I like to refer to as a human network. It's a term I borrowed from Cisco. Because it really is, at the end of the day, about people. It's about people connecting with each other based around contextual themes and topics, not necessarily building relationships and connections how they did in the real world, per se. And what we're learning is that just because we have access to all of these new tools and services and networks that are out there doesn't necessarily mean that we have something interesting to say, yet we are adopting them now, and we are using them now as if everything we say needs to be shared. And I point this out because if we're talking about the socialization of your corporate brand, we have to realize that there are multiple sides to that brand, especially in the social web. There's the brand, there's the representative of the brand, and then there's the personal brand of the representative of the corporate brand. And not to complicate things, but we have to sort of be aware of all of those things when we're out there participating and updating. Because at the end of the day, every tweet, every blog post, every comment, every bookmark, every video we upload, every picture we share, it starts to become part of the Google index or the search index. And so when people look at the brand or they look up your name, these are the things that come up in the results. And the truth is that we have the ability to steer that perception. We have the ability to guide what those results look like. In fact, I'm going to be writing a post later today, if I can make some time, about some recent numbers that came out from Career Builder, as well as some of the other universities who are talking about how recruiters and how HR managers and also admissions officers are taking a look at Google and social networks before they interview somebody or before they grant someone at least a granted application to attend a particular school. So kind of going into that and remembering that we're talking now about the corporate brand and then your role in the whole marketing mix. Just because we've had the ability to update content, because it's a democratization of content and a democratization of influence, there's a little bit of a sense of entitlement out there for that. People are feeling like they are entitled to share, they are entitled to update, and that's the empowerment, that's the beauty of all of this stuff. But the truth is that the social web should be treated as a privilege. It's a privilege to have the ability to connect with someone else. It's a privilege to be able to have these channels to reach potential customers or existing customers. It is a privilege to become a resource for the community. What we're learning about is a lot of companies and how they're doing things the wrong way as opposed to necessarily looking at things the right way. I mean, there's a reason why we keep hearing the same case studies over and over again. But where things start to go wrong is we just don't necessarily listen as much as we broadcast. We definitely broadcast more than we listen, and even when we listen, we're not necessarily truly hearing what it is that people are saying or what they're looking for. And that's critical. It's absolutely critical because it's not necessarily about what we say. It's about what they say that matters, and that's what counts, right? So when we're going to Twitter or we're going to Facebook or we're going to blog comments, we're not necessarily thinking through what it is that impression that we want to form among people. We are just moving and reacting, at least most of the companies that I observe and watch and analyze. That's the way they're doing it. We feel like there's this conversation that's taking place and we want to be part of it. We want to lead it. But you know, where's the real value in that? Where's the real value in responding to anyone and everyone out in social networks? There's got to be a greater strategy around it, right? There's got to be, ways of there's got to be ways of helping people feel like they're part of a community. This slide here, I have it in here for a very specific reason. In the social web, things can take off. And they take off when you least expect it, when you least want it, and sometimes when you do want it. But in those instances where things just catch on fire and backfire on you, you just can never underestimate the social web. And you need to think it through in terms of your goals and objectives before you even participate, right? Because a lot of companies are looking at social networks the wrong way in the sense that they're underestimating its potential. They're underestimating the value of the people on the other side. This summer, the term twin turn became really popular where companies like Pizza Hut went out and qualified the unpaid position of recent graduates to come in and lead Twitter on behalf of the company. There's a variety of reasons why companies are looking at it that way. I mostly hear it's because they're, the younger generations are most familiar with social networking, of which I vehemently disagree with. But the truth is that just because they know how to use the tools, again, just because we have access to these tools doesn't necessarily mean that we're using them the right way. Because who better than an expert within the organization who understands the story and the value proposition of a company, who understands the differentiation of a company as it relates to their competitors in the marketplace, who understands the challenges, hurdles, needs, wants, shortcomings of their customer base. Those are the people who can learn to log into a social network, listen to the conversations in the social network, and engage strategically. That's what this is about. So companies that are undervaluing this opportunity will get what they deserve in the end. Because at the end of the day, there's no market for shilling. There's no market for messages. Yet, if you follow a lot of these brands that are getting out there, they're selling, they're pitching, they're advertising. And some of them are doing it the wrong way. Earlier in the deck, you saw that I had Habitat in there, which was one of the more recent yet not alone examples of a company doing it the wrong way. They were advertising their new collection of furniture by adding hashtags related to the trending topics, so Iran election, Wasabi, iPhone, and that was their way of trying to hope that it would appear in everybody's attention dashboards, and it did. It just didn't come across the way they wanted it to. And so in that moment of failure, the company responded and said, look, it was a mistake. It was our intern who did that, and they just didn't know any better. Well, that's the brand's mistake. That's the company's mistake. It's the executive's mistake. Do not turn over something so powerful, something that is such a privilege, to someone who doesn't necessarily understand the dynamics of human behavior, human interaction, and how to adapt and connect your story to what they're looking for. Right? because this is an image I borrowed off of Google Images and added the one at the bottom. Because what we have to do before we even think about sending out a tweet or even sending out these blog posts or setting up these fan pages or trying to build communities where our brand can be socialized in a very strategic way, we have to figure out what that brand is on the social web. Is that brand? What is that brand personality? And what is your role and how it ties to that brand personality? How does your personality and the brand personality mix? Because there's that saying, people do business with people they like. There's this common saying in social media that there are no companies, there are no brands, there are just the people behind the brands, right? But, in some sense, I disagree with that. The brand has always had a personality, right? I mean, all the way back to when brands and branding became a marketing device. It was always to steer the impression and perception of that brand personality to sort of instill resonance. So brands have personalities. Obviously, people have personalities. We have to think about how those two will work together out there. What is it that we want to project? There's another thing that I call multiple personality order, right? Because a lot of the questions that I hear from people are, well, wait a minute. If this is true, if a brand has a personality, I have a personality, and we're going to go out there and fortify these strategically, then who am I on the social web? Am I me? Am I me as a representative of a company? How does that work? Do I maintain multiple accounts on multiple networks? There's no right or wrong answer to that. There's opinions, and my opinion is that I believe you should have a separate account if you're going to be the representative of a brand in these social networks. Or you can take the face of that brand if done right and authentically and transparently, in terms of how you're interacting with the communities. I say that because at the end of the day, we are consumers too. We are regular people outside of our professional lives. Your personal accounts, whether you use them for work or for play or for both, you have to remember that you have connections there who are following you for very specific reasons. You have people that are connected to you for very specific reasons. They probably aren't, some are probably not going to care about what your company is up to, and others are probably not going to care about what you're doing tonight or this weekend or what you're eating or the fact that you're at the gym. These are things that need to be delicately handled and also invested in so that you can grow each community in the way that you want, right? It's not just about broadcast, it's about getting something back. It's a two-way street. So I absolutely believe you should have multiple personality order. It's the only way to actually strategically cultivate a community, whether it's personal or professional, in a way that it's intended, right? And then at that point, we have to work together to reach that common goal, to instill that brand personality, fortify that presence, enhance this resonance, this reverberation that, we call the social effect that can just go on and on and on across multiple networks. It's dividing and conquering, right? Because a lot of people, especially those companies that are becoming more sophisticated in the social web, are realizing that it's not small. It's not a small process. It's not a small project. They need more than one person usually to get out there to handle this, to steer people, to answer questions. And what we learn is that when that starts to happen, there has to be sort of this organization. There has to be this processes established, these guidelines established so that people know what they're responsible for and how they're going to track things and how they're going to respond and how they're going to report back in terms of metrics. The other thing is establishing your brand as standing for something in the social web, because these days, it's not just Google that comes back with results. It's, tools like this. This is just something I ran my Twitter URL through, and these were the words that came up that I most often discuss. It's about becoming an information curator. It's about becoming a resource for your community that you're trying to build. So what does that activity look like when you stop and look backwards? So one of the things that I'm working on right now is what I call the tenets of community building. And it's far from complete, and I'm sure that even when it's done, it'll be far from being comprehensive. It'll always evolve, and I think in a lot of cases, the community is going to help define these. For example, one of the discussions I was having this morning is related to the upcoming announcements of, well, not just the upcoming, but the existing announcements of companies who are being paid by brands to hire people on Twitter to inject sponsored tweets into their stream. And it's one of the reasons why the FTC is looking into setting guidelines for disclosure. But this stuff is happening. People are surprisingly responding that they support it and that they don't mind, these tweets coming into their stream. But we have to remember, though, that at the end of the day, we have to stand for something. If we are indeed building a community, then there are some things that we need to do specifically to get people to want to be part of that community. It's not just because we're participating. It's not just because we just suddenly set up an account on Twitter or a fan page on Facebook or a community in Ning that is just going to have hundreds or thousands of people flocking to it just because we decided to hit the switch. It doesn't work that way. The rules that govern social media are the same rules that govern human interaction in the real world. The difference is that people are more often more likely to do or say things online than they were to your face, than they were in person. So you have to account for this. You have to establish these core values of what people can connect to. You have to give people something that they can hold on to, something that they can believe in, something that they can aspire to and look up to, something they can respect and trust, something that they could be proud to say to someone else, I am in this community because, and it's up to you to help them finish that sentence. And, for example, yesterday I was speaking at Zappos, their inaugural Insights program, where they bring brands who want to learn about the Zappos culture in for a 2-day immersion experience. And it was unbelievable. At the end of the process, I can guarantee you that every single person who walked through those doors can tell you what Zappos' core values are. More importantly, those values and the people behind those values and the people that sort of enforce those values and carry those values outward and inward help establish the culture for that brand. And in any community, it's not just about the keywords. It's not just about those keywords that you're using in Twitter search right now. It's about the culture tied behind the activity behind those keywords. It's the people, how they act, how they interact, why, what are they looking for, what they stand for, who do they align with and why. These are the things that we need to think about when we're establishing that corporate culture and the culture of the community itself and how those two cultures can collaborate. Otherwise, they're going to clash. And these are things that we need to think about as we're trying to build this out. Right? The other thing is affinity. Right? Affinity is nothing new to marketing at all. I mean, there's a whole discipline dedicated to affinity marketing. But the point is this. If we're talking about the human nature that it forms the culture, that forms the community that you wish to establish when you are socializing your brand, right? Because the brand becomes humanized. It's about affinity. People need to connect with something for some reason. So what is that you're going to give them? What is it that you're going to stand for? Right? This one didn't seem to come through in the WebEx upload, but in the bottom right-hand corner it says believable. Because a lot of companies think that just being transparent is enough on the social web. That maybe being authentic is enough. Well, I mean, it's a wordplay, right? I mean, if you want to just talk about words, well, transparent could mean see-through, right? Or authentic. I can authentically be an asshole, but I'm being authentic, so love me. The truth is that you got to be believable. If we're talking about affinity, we're talking about alignment of cultures and personalities, then you have to be believable. You have to be convincing. You have to be someone who's contagious. That means you have to know what you stand for and you have to believe in what you represent, so that way it is believable. Otherwise, you might not necessarily be at the right company or in the right role. It takes that, yes. It takes that level of commitment, that level of understanding, that level of passion. That's why they call it, that's why they call these people evangelists, because they are out there professing that this is something they believe in, and in turn, they're recruiting people into the same beliefs. Because we're establishing these relationships online. These relationships are not like the relationships we have in real life. These are the new sort of relationships that are being defined by the social web. But it doesn't matter. They establish the social capital that we have out there. It's not about how many numbers you have in terms of friends and followers. It's about the quality of those people who decide to align with you. Because those are the people who will help carry you forward, who will help you scale. You can't necessarily even hope or to one day afford the ability to respond to every conversation that takes place in the social web. You need a community to act on your behalf. You need a community to feel empowered to do so. You need a community to know what to say and how to say it based on what they're learning from you as a role model. Because these are the conversations that start to represent social currency. And in my experience, things move left to right. And in this case, what we're seeing in social media in terms of the effectiveness of those who can socialize their brand and build communities are those who instill service, those who communicate before they try to market or sell. Because those two divisions ultimately will start to get onto the social web. But those who lead by service and through communications will learn how to do this the right way. Because this is not just a two-way street. This is not just about the ability for pushing and pulling. This is about an equal exchange. People will follow, people will stay connected with you because they get something out of that experience. That's what counts. That's what counts for everything. You have to get something out of that experience as well. You have to invest in that exchange so that somebody else can walk away with something. Somebody's got to feel better off because they're following you. Somebody's got to feel like they learned something they couldn't get from someone else because they're connected to you. So what is it that you're going to feed them? It's the process of uncampaigning, right? Brands, when they market, truth be told, I don't know if this is going to come to a shock to anyone, but conversations existed long before the social web, right? Brands were being socialized before the social web. The difference is that we have access to find those voices, those influential voices in those networks where this is happening, right? The brands are bringing the idea of how they marketed it in the real world to the social web, and they're campaigning. Everything's a campaign. Everything's viral marketing. Everything is about a viral video. It's not necessarily about the greater good for the community or the greater good for the brand. You have to uncampaign. You have to act, right? Every company or every social media expert professes the process of listening. But so what? So you listen. It's great. We're now in an era where we are shifting from monitoring conversations to engaging in those strategic conversations. Not just to listen, but more to hear and more to empathize with those that we're trying to reach. To build a better infrastructure in order to better support them now and later. What we're doing today is not just competing for their attention and for their dollars or for their votes or for their support or whatever it is that we're doing. We are competing for the future, and that is what is the most powerful prospect of all of this. The things that we are doing now, the things that we are hearing, and the way we are responding, and the way we are transforming our organization from the inside out because of what we're learning from the experiences, is allowing us to more effectively compete for the future. You are investing not only now, but for later. That's unmarketing. And that is also marketing at the same time. It is the beauty, it is the art, it is the science of instilling brand resonance, for catalyzing or galvanizing sort of brand reverberation through the process of unmarketing. It's brilliant, and it's wonderful, and people feel great being part of it. Because in the process of all of this, you're earning influence, you're earning prominence, you're earning authority, you're earning significance, you're earning worth, you're earning trust, you're earning communities and community friendships. And that is what's ultimately the most powerful thing out of this, because it's measured in not just relationships, but loyalty or sales or, fill in the blank. You can watch it. You can monitor it. You can track it. What this all nets down to is that it's not about Twitter. It's not about Facebook. It's not about me. Those are just tools. Those are just services. Those tools and services are going to change, adapt, evolve. They're going to dissipate. They're going to merge. They're going to reappear some other way. They're going to mash up. And there's going to be new tools that are going to be introduced to us now, tomorrow, next year. There's more of the sociology element to all of this, or the digital anthropology to all of this, that allows us to understand human behavior, what they're looking for, how they interact, how they communicate. In order to immerse ourselves in the cultures of which we're trying to impact, we have to become part of those cultures, right? And so it's listening, it's observation, but that's what separates experts and theorists, right? Because conversations are distributed. Conversations don't just take place on Twitter. Yet that is where people are putting all of their marketing dollars right now if they are experimenting with pilot programs in social media. I'm not saying you don't need to be there. I'm just saying that there's a reason why Jesse and I came out with the conversation prism. Because it was to show companies, or show anyone really, that the social web is vast. It is much bigger than we think. And because Twitter has everybody talking and has celebrities tweeting and, helping Twitter cross sort of the chasms in that bell curve a lot faster than other social networks, it's not the only place where conversations are taking place by any means. And the point of this prism was to show you that if you just use the search box and enter a couple of keywords like your company or your competitor's company or some interesting keywords related to your industry, that you could unearth where those networks of importance are and how active they are and what that interactivity looks like so that you could know and prioritize where you need to be. Most often, Google groups and Yahoo groups never even get discussed because that's Web 1.0. It's not Twitter. It's not sexy. It's not making the front page of the New York Times about what brands are doing to lead in this new era of service and marketing. But if your intent is to satisfy the needs of customers or potential customers, then you can't just be on Twitter because everybody's on Twitter. You have to be where your customers and your prospects are. And that is how we learn. Because this is a map that I did based on a company that I worked with where we identified not only those influential communities, but also those influential voices within those communities, and more importantly, how they connected to each other. And what we realized is that there wasn't just one network, there wasn't just two networks, there were multiple networks that required interaction, but it wasn't necessarily interaction because of a community presence. It was interaction from an influencer perspective, meaning that people of influence were cross-network connecting. And this map, if it were live, you could actually click around and see how people were linked to each other, show that people were linking to each other from Twitter to a blog, from blog to Facebook, from Facebook to LinkedIn. And we could find that the cross-network influential map was exactly how we would need to participate and with whom we need to participate. And by following these particular people, we could reach a greater number of people. We just needed to understand how they were interacting, what they were looking for, the problems they were having, the challenges that they had, and the solutions they were looking for. But that's the point. It was greater than any one network, and we were able to document it and create a map that proved it. These are real people that are having a real impact to our bottom line. And ultimately what's going to happen is that those networks are going to, they already do, it's a matter of time until we connect the dots ourselves, that any conversation that takes place out there of influence or prominence will directly map to a division within your organization. It's not just for marketing. It's not just for a community manager. It's going to be PR, HR, sales, development, customer service. These conversations are already identifiable and parsable right now by who should be responding and why and how and what the results could possibly be that benefit from it. Because in the end, we are measured by our actions, not the words that we tweet, not the words that we use in a blog post, but what we do with those. By what we do when we listen to those conversations out there, our actions are what define who we are today and tomorrow. because we earn the relationships, the trust, the credibility that we deserve as it's represented through those actions. So with that, Mike, I'm done if you want to take the ball back.
Very cool. Just jumping back here real quick. So we have a ton of questions, Brian, just so you know, that came in both through Twitter and on through WebEx as well. But before everybody does that, you got to sit through one quick pitch again, and it's just about our upcoming sessions from Awareness. We have a pretty good. I think I'm really excited about the webinar schedule we have coming up. At the end of the month, we have Adam Broidman from Circus at CIRC.us coming on to talk about innovative marketing. Mike Volpe, who's the CMO of HubSpot. If you aren't familiar with HubSpot, check them out online. They got a really cool tool to help with lead generation and monitoring leads that are coming to your website. He'll be on August 13th. Chris Brogan's coming on. Actually, the date's wrong on that. It's supposed to be August 26th, just a couple of days after his book Trust Agents comes out. So be sure to register for that. That'll be a great one. Larry Weber, the infamous Larry Weber, who was on just a few months back, we'll be talking about his latest book, which is called Sticks and Stones, and I'm excited to have Larry coming back out, and I think we might actually do that one live, so we'll have some video going for that. And then finally, we have Joe Trippi scheduled for September 22nd. If you don't know who Joe Trippi is, do a quick web search on him, check him out on Wikipedia. This is the guy that did all the social media marketing around Howard Dean for president way back when, consulted on Barack Obama for his social media strategy as he was running for president. So a lot of great stuff coming up. Check it out on our website. We haven't added Joe to the webinar list yet, but we'll be doing that by tomorrow. So hope you can make the other sessions we have coming up. One other thing, Brian, I threw this in. I know you haven't seen this yet, but if you haven't read it yet, I can't stress enough that really take a minute and go out and grab Brian's book. I'm going to be including this on the email that's going to go out after this. That's going to have a link to the recording of today's session as well as the slides and podcast of the Q&A that we're about to have. So please take a minute, go out and grab Brian's book. It's available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and Borders. And again, I'll be sending the link directly so you can just click on the link and be able to just go right and purchase the book right from one of those sources. So real quickly, if you have any questions, again, feel free to use the WebEx interface or Pound Awareness Inc. to ask anything you'd like about today's session or otherwise, I guess, and we'll answer as many of them as we can. We got to jump off. We only have about 15, 20 minutes left, but I'm going to just jump right in, Brian. I hope you don't mind.
No, please do.
So we have a lot of guys that come in on our webinars, and they talk about they use words like dialogue, transparency, etc. And you mentioned this a little bit during the talk today, but what really is the value of creating a dialogue, creating transparency? Is there a value to doing that?
I don't know, like Kenny Payne says, when you're trying to measure ROI, you have to define what the R is. And anytime I get involved in social media, I have to define what the intent is, what the goals are, and where it is that we need to be today, and where it is we need to be tomorrow. And what always ends up happening is that it just sort of changes the perspective, right? When you come at this from a cultural standpoint, when you're coming at this from how it is that you're going to reinforce that brand personality, what it is that you want people to see, and what it is you want to get out of the experience, you start looking at things that way. You stop talking about things like dialogue and conversation and transparency, because now you have some very specific, tangible things that you need to tie what you're going to do and what people are going to get out of it, and also what you're going to get out of it. So the thing that I see, because I haven't announced it yet, but I am writing my next book, and I have been talking to a lot of really prominent companies who are out there. And the thing that I hear across the board is that people are just responding to dialogue. People are responding to conversations because that is, in of itself, the initial value that these companies see. What I'm saying is it's not invaluable. I mean, if you have the time and the resources and the budget to have someone out there on Twitter responding to everybody who mentions your name or your competitors or your market, great. But most people don't. Most people need to see that their resources and time are being spent wisely. So identifying conversations and the voices behind them, and as it relates to what their theme is, as it relates to what they're looking for, as it relates to their social graph, this is the type of things that we start to analyze that might have greater value to any company looking at participating, not just from getting something out of it, but for helping someone who could then in turn be a catalyst for extending the size and shape of that community.
No, that's a great point. I think it also touches on some of the things you were talking about earlier around the the twin turns and that kind of stuff. But one of the things that we're seeing, and I'm wondering if you're seeing the same thing, and this is a question that came in both on Twitter and on WebEx, but does a social media strategy have to be top down? In other words, does it have to come from the powers that be to influence everything that you're doing inside a company, engaging in the social web? And also, one of the other questions that's kind of a follow-on to it is, how do you get buy-in for everything that's going on to buy into a social media strategy from executives?
Okay, so that's a
two-part question, complicated, I know, and it's a big one.
Well, it's not. These are the questions that I'm tackling on day-to-day basis. Exactly why I'm writing this next book, because I'm really just, at some point we have to stop talking about theory. We have to stop talking about transparency. We have to stop talking about dialogue and conversation. We have to start talking about what this means for business and what this means for people, right? And that's why some of the best examples coming out of any of this is driven by customer service. And it's not just by customer service because of responding to people and solving problems. It's through certain cases that I can't share yet because I've been asked not to. In certain cases where they're not just addressing problems, but they're fixing the infrastructure internally because of what they're learning through those influential voices. And from there, think about the ROI of any of that, right? We're now having a reduction in inbound calls. We're having a reduction in outbound responses. We're having an increase in sales because we built a better product. We're starting to tie the I in ROI to very specific business practices. And that's where social media starts to become very interesting to executives. Because right now it's loose. It's elusive. People aren't necessarily measuring. In fact, most companies that I talk to are just participating out of a sense of urgency. They feel they need to be part of these conversations. They feel like they're missing out if they're not on Twitter because every other company is on Twitter, according to USA Today and Business Week and the Wall Street Journal. So when you stop just moving and reacting and start thinking about what it is, I mean, if you just look at these conversations, you actually can start to see trending patterns. You can start to see things that are beneficial to your organization. Like I said earlier, you can also start to see that those conversations map specifically to departments within your organization. So as long as there's an infrastructure to take, learn, and adapt based on what you're learning, and then also kind of come in there and steer perception in a way that is more complementary to the company as it exists right now, you can start to, and the other thing that I probably should have mentioned here in terms of one of the tenets for community building is experience, right? Because right now, when you're driving somebody, where are you driving them to? Are you driving them to your homepage? Are you driving them to a support page? Are you driving them to, a blog post? So once you start to once you start to steer these conversations to old world landing pages, you lose the ability to measure that interaction. So defining experience is not just tying them to specific business practices, but defining that experience like taking them to do something, having some sort of call to action, taking them to specifically learn or download or register for something. You can start to see the pattern of what Twitter really does to in order to measure what a blog post really does, what friend feed really does. So we have to start reverse engineering. What is it that we want to accomplish in order to accomplish it and in order to measure it?
No, I think that's a great point. That's actually what we're seeing here as well. We didn't talk about this beforehand, but this is kind of why this is one of the big reasons actually why we developed our and I don't mean this to be a sales pitch, but it's why we came out with our 8 best practice communities, right? Because a lot of companies are coming to us saying we don't know how to get involved in social media and want to be able to tie it to a specific business goal, especially around the ROI side of things. And that's where we see the most effective use of social media is when they actually are able to tie it to something, whether it's peer support or lead generation or whatever it is. That's the people that are really starting to get it and being able to tie it to something that is a business goal for what it is that they're doing. So yeah, I think that's a great point, and something I think a lot of people lose sight of, in all the buzz that's going on and all the hype that's going on around social media. There's another specific question that's coming in. This is a little bit more tactical, but I think it's a good one. It's around how companies should respond to negative comments on the social web. So the company that gets involved and all of a sudden there's stuff happening that's negatively influencing their brand image across the social web. How should companies respond to that?
Companies need to kind of stop and sit back, take a look at it, and take on more of a digital anthropology role before they take on a crisis communications role to see exactly the nature of that problem or that negative comment or that issue. Because there's always something that drove it. And most of the time, we just respond without necessarily seeing what it is that caused it, because it could very well require a solution. It could very well require the activity and attention of certain people within that organization in order to get some type of resolution in place before you can reach out. The easy answer, before we get any deeper, is that you'll never know about these negative conversations if you're not monitoring for them, right? So at the very least, that has to start. That has to start now. That has to be delegated to somebody to at least start to find these, should they arise. Because we all heard about the Motrin Mom instance where, of course, no one had found out, this conversation had escalated until days later. But had someone just probably seen it and understood what the problem was and maybe talked to some people and immediately responded, it could have been diffused. Now, how do you respond? Well, I guess it depends on the nature of the conversation. I would actually say that not every negative conversation needs a response, right? In a lot of cases, and this is just true from a psychological standpoint, things just dissipate. Things are moving too quickly. I mean, just watch any one person's tweet deck and see how fast conversations are flying through that column before something just sputters away because of something new that's introduced. But those that require a response should have a resolution ready in hand or have some sort of answer ready in hand or a question in order to get that data ready so that you can have something of genuine intent to respond with the resolution so that comes through in your engagement. That's what it takes. But then, I'd argue too that some or maybe most, unless you're ready to learn from that experience and that exchange, are probably better off without you. Because if you're not ready to resolve something, not just at that moment, but for anybody else who might experience that now and in the future, it might cause more damage than good. And that's just a fact.
Yeah, no, I agree, and it actually touches on one of the other questions that came in, and it's around do you see organizations hesitating on engaging versus monitoring conversations, or do you see them just taking the time just to listen but actually not act on anything that they're hearing?
Well, it's all of the above. I have companies that I speak with that are monitoring, but they're not engaging because they don't have an infrastructure for doing so. I have certain companies that are monitoring and responding to everything. And then I have certain companies that just haven't started yet because they can't find, they can definitely find excuses, but they can't necessarily find the resources or money or budget to start. There's not enough information to start. There's not enough urgency to start. There's not enough data available for analysis to start. It's pretty easy. Somebody within that organization is probably capable, ready, and willing right now to add some time to their day or just move something that's less valuable off their plate to at least start listening and documenting.
So that's a good question. It actually leads into another great question that's come up is how do people get started with everything? I mean, what's the easiest way for people to jump in and how do they keep it going? We got a couple of questions around, how do we get started in this? I'm new to this. My company's just starting to look at social media. In your opinion, what's the easiest way to get started?
Well, the easiest way, there's no easy way, right? I mean, I know that there will be there will be a social media for dummies that comes out, I'm pretty sure, but I'm not confident that anything that shortcuts or cliff notes or circumvents the depth required here to do this the right way is going to have value. So let me start by saying this. The easiest way to figure out where to go and what to do and how to do it is to figure out what's going on around you. And don't look at, other company case studies. It's not important at the moment. That's important later for strategy. Right now we need to create a case for a pilot program. We need to create a case that demonstrates that we are indeed not capitalizing on an opportunity. We have to define that an opportunity exists. So it was the other reason why I came out with the conversation prism, was because at the end of the day, you can use those search boxes, and if you Google, if you go to conversationprism.com and you click on blog, there's two posts. One is the Conversation Prism sort of introduces how to use it and the value of it. Basically what it tells you is your role, your place within the Prism, and how to search and what you're looking for. And then there's a companion post called the Conversation Index. And that specifically tells you what to do with that search data as it comes back. Because it's here where we can actually define not just the case, but where to go, what to do once we're there. Because what you start to document are things like frequency of conversation, of course, which network is becoming dominant. Of those conversations, who, was a response required, and if so, who should have responded? Is that customer service? Is that executive management? Is that PR, or what have you? What's the size of the community? What was the sentiment of the dialogue, positive, neutral, negative? I know that there are tools that automate some of this stuff, but there is no one tool that automates the entire social web, because a lot of these are proprietary. They don't open up their search boxes to APIs, which means you can't search them through a tool. And sentiment can never be automated. That needs a human, at least as you're trying to put together the critical starting point. Absolutely. That needs a human element, because you have to feel what it is that people are saying. You can't just read that 37% people are negative. You have to understand why. What are the trending topics behind that? What are people learning? What are people saying? So these, once you start to bucket these things, and it's explained in the conversation index, you can now start to have data. I suggest doing it for a month period or a 60-day period. But you have data that you can put into a spreadsheet, and you can export into graphics that show all of these things that are they become very compelling to any executive management or anyone at any level in terms of how this affects them, or how we can jump into this as a way of doing something better that we're not doing today.
So let me ask you this as a follow-up question, and someone just asked this through WebEx. What's the biggest mistake that most companies make when they're starting a social media program?
They jump in. They go and they set up a Twitter account, they set up a Facebook fan page, maybe they set up a blog, but they just start producing and broadcasting and sharing and not thinking about all of the things that we discussed about in terms of intent, goals, objectives, brand personality versus personal brand. And then, they wonder why people aren't necessarily following them or recommending them or referring them or retweeting them, or they wonder why people aren't, just flocking in droves to their fan page. That's the biggest mistake most organizations make. And the other mistake is that they just don't do the research themselves. That this idea of the conversation prism and the index, they look for answers in the case studies. They look for answers from all of these ridiculous blog posts from social media experts that that just purport, go out and get on Twitter or get on Facebook. And the truth is that everybody within an organization who runs through that conversation prism and that conversation index will probably learn more than most social media experts out there, because it's about feeling, seeing, and learning for yourself. Because you're going to have to be that champion internally. Someone's going to have to know what the hell is going on out there in order to be convincing internally, let alone, having an outward voice.
So let me ask you this, and this is this is one of my own questions. So I was reading your blog last night, doing my research for today, and I saw a post recently about a Forrester estimate that came out that I paid a lot of attention to. Obviously, we work with a lot of marketing agencies here, and I know there are a lot in the line. And the post was about how Forrester predicts that by 2014, $55 billion is going to be spent in interactive marketing, and traditional channels are just going to continue to decline. What does that mean for marketing agencies? Because they're continuing to struggle with social media. How do they need to adapt going forward to adjust kind of their strategies to make sure that they aren't losing as big a chunk of that business?
Well, Mike, didn't you hear? Everybody's a social media expert now.
I have heard that.
It's not just interactive, and it's not just traditional marketing agencies. I mean, it's affecting everything. It's affecting most outsourced disciplines as it relates to any corporate function, because everyone who's on the outside is starting to feel the pinch, and they're coming back and trying to sort of socialize their portfolio of services, if you will. So you have a lot of new types of breeds of interactive or social media consultancies that are either cropping up or just merging away from what they used to be. What does that mean specifically to them? I think it's digital Darwinism. Some people are not going to make it, and some people are going to make it. But those people who actually take the time to understand what this is all about and figure out the science behind it and the metrics behind it, the ability to adapt new processes to old ways of measuring or old ways of thinking are what it's going to take in order to bring everybody forward. Forrester also said in that report that money that wasn't going to traditional would go to things, like the unmarketing aspects that we were talking about that end up having marketing impact, where that money would go to product development, that money would go to customer service, that money was going to go into the things that actually create a better experience. So there are opportunities for agencies and consultancies to adapt. They just have to know where and why and how and what people will need, and also become the experts in their fields in order to be not just convincing, but to stop leading companies down the wrong path. Because if we can all learn together, if we can all succeed together, then companies are only going to benefit, and we're going to benefit in the process.
Well, here's a question that came in just as we were talking about that, and it's around well, I'll just read it to you, and that way you can get the full breadth of everything. But it says, how closely do you recommend social media marketing be aligned with traditional marketing to optimize the impact? Would one replace the other, or would you keep everything you're using and give social media a quote-unquote peripheral role in everything you're doing? Long question, I know.
It depends on what comes out of that process of the PRISM and the index. What ends up happening is that you capture all this data, and you can create this sort of social map, that represents all of the networks that you need to participate in. And further, if you wanted to get even more graphical, you could add which departments should be specific for which network, right? And you get the social map that is going to not be anything like what the map would look like from another company. And I guess what I'm saying is that the digital footprint is going to be unique by brand. So what I get from that process is going to tell me what I put, in terms of dollars and resources, and whether I come up with it or I take it away from something else, and if so, to what extent, based on what comes back in that process. Now, what I do practice, however, is I take everything in sort of pilot programs so that we have the ability to measure in snapshots of what you end up forming out of this whole process is, like you say, you take a 60 or 30-day period of that conversation index. Well, you establish a conversation index, right? You establish what is. And anything you do moving forward, you continue to listen and you continue to document all of this stuff to see how it compares to before. What ends up happening is that you start to realize that certain things that you're doing are working extremely well and have great feedback and results. And you can start to see what you need to invest more time in and more, maybe more money or more process in, what you could possibly take away that isn't having such great results. Or, the fact is that you might need to continue to experiment. But either way, you have to have the metrics in hand. You have to know what you're looking for in order to effectively take away from something else strategically. In my experience, when people do start experimenting with social media, at the beginning and then as it evolves, money and people are coming from other places, and that's important. And the more that continues to swell over time is because they're documenting, greater efficiencies in these social programs than other things that people are doing today.
That makes sense. Well, Brian, I don't want to keep you anymore. We're running right up to 3 o'clock, and I want to say thanks. I appreciate you taking some time with us today, and I know the activity on Twitter has been great, so I know the people really enjoyed it. I know there are some questions that we'll have to answer after, but I really appreciate you taking some time with us today.
It's my pleasure. I just want to thank everybody for being here and taking the time out of their day. I really appreciate it. And if you do have a chance, it's Amazon. It's only $15. That book is really written. It took a year to write. It is not outdated, contrary to popular belief of print. It's got years ahead of it, but it really talks about all of the things that we discussed today. So it's not just about public relations. It's the notion that what we're talking about here today is just that. It is relations and relating to the public, and the social web is the public. So it's a book that can help anyone from customer service to marketing to interactive to just every department can benefit from that book.
Excellent. Yeah, and like I said, I can't recommend it enough. It's really a great book. So, but again, Brian, thank you very much. I appreciate your time, and look forward to talking with you soon.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.